It started with a dare. For friends, all thrill-seekers by nature, decided to enter the old tunnel carved deep into the hills of Baluchizadan. Locals called it the Whispering Mouth, saying that no sound ever came out of it, even if you screamed, and they planned to test that. Just as dawn broke, the sky tinged orange and pink as the sun finally broke the edge of the mountain. They stepped into the darkness, laughing, recording everything for their travel vlog, but only one came back. And when he did, he didn't speak a word of the language he or anyone else knew. But before we begin, make sure to hit subscribe because you won't find a story like this anywhere else. The tunnel had long been abandoned, its entrance hidden behind layers of rock and brush. Older villagers said it was once a passageway used by a civilization that vanished without record. But these stories seemed absurd, so no one paid them much heed. That is, until the group found it on an old, tattered map one of them bought from a market seller who refused to touch it without gloves. Maybe that should have been the first sign. They found the tunnel at the base of a stony hill overlooking a dried riverbed, far from the lives they knew. It looked like a giant mouth, dark and gaping, ready to swallow them whole. The air around it was colder than it had any right to be. Their flashlights, usually so bright and bold, could only make dim shadows in the thick darkness. For the first hour, they laughed, joked, and explored, filming everything. They took turns standing at the mouth, pretending to be swallowed by the earth. They walked down a winding staircase carved into the rock. They took pictures of symbols that decorated the wall shapes and designs no one could quite decipher. And all the while, the tunnel stayed silent, which was unsettling. Then suddenly, after 30 minutes of nervous laughter, the screaming started. 3 voices echoed in fear and silence. When the rescue team arrived at the tunnel the next morning, they found Rafik cowered and trembling. His flashlight rolled nearby, still on, and casting a shaky beam onto the wall. Rescue workers didn't see or hear anything unusual at first. Only the tunnel's oppressive darkness and Rafik's terrified face. They coaxed him out, each step slow and unsure. He lived in a village in a bustling city, a thriving metropolis with crowded streets and tall buildings. So the sight of this weathered tunnel both excited and frightened him. It was a stark contrast to his everyday life, like something out of a movie. It felt alien, menacing, and utterly captivating. As he emerged from the tunnel, his parents rushed towards him, relief and worry etched on their faces. When they finally embraced him, he flinched. His eyes darted to corners that held nothing. He spoke, but it wasn't in the language they knew. They couldn't understand a word he was saying, and this confused him too, because he didn't know what he was saying. When they brought him home, experts came in. Linguists scratched their heads. Psychologists were baffled. Spiritual leaders offered ancient remedies. No one could explain what he was saying, but the words had patterns, cadence, grammar, even musicality. It was a real language, just not one that anyone there recognized. Days later, an inscription was found deep in the ruins of a lost city hundreds of miles away, one no one had spoken of for centuries. Scholars pored over these newly discovered carvings and compared them to Rafik's words. They found a match. He was speaking the language of a people who had lived thousands of years ago. But how could he speak a dead language, and why? Why would such a thing happen? We may never have answers for these questions, but there are more. When Rafik was better, he agreed to meet with researchers. They found him staring at the ceiling of his room, tracing shapes on the wall with his finger. When he turned, his eyes blank and distant, he continued drawing the symbol he'd traced on the ceiling. He didn't respond to their questions, not at first. Slowly, very slowly, he began to speak. But he wasn't speaking Urdu, the language he grew up with. He wasn't speaking English or any other modern language. He was speaking the ancient tongue they found carved in the ruins, the one they believed died with the civilization that carved it. And what he said shocked them. He described his journey through the Whispering Mouth, told them about the cold, the twisting stairs, the cryptic symbols on the walls. Then he spoke of 3 figures, dark shapes that moved at the edge of his vision, always there, always watching. They never spoke, but their silence pressed against him like a physical weight. He talked of how he got separated from his friends and how he heard their screams echoing within the tunnels, desperate, then fading away. He mentioned finding a room filled with whispers, voices that brushed against his ears, chilling him to the bone. He spoke of an overwhelming feeling of dread and the urge to flee. Then he woke up in his bed at home, unable to recall a single detail until he saw the tunnel in his dream. When he began speaking again, he stopped using his old name. Now he introduced himself by the name that flowed from his lips. When he spoke the old language Xavier, it means traveler in that ancient tongue. He wore simple, rough clothing, ate plain food, and spent most of his time drawing the symbols he'd seen in the tunnel. He spoke often. Sometimes his sentences were coherent, sometimes they weren't. He would launch into the old language unexpectedly mid-conversation, startling those around him. Spoke of things beyond their understanding, of a world that existed before recorded history. Of a time when the stars themselves sang a different tune. We spoke of a forgotten path. One day, he pointed at the stars and began reciting something that made the researcher holding the recorder faint. He described constellations that wouldn't form in our skies for another 3,000 years. He talked about celestial events that hadn't happened yet, but which, according to his words, had occurred in a time long past. This was more than just a tale. It was a warning, a glimpse into a world where time flowed differently, where echoes of the past mingled with whispers of the future. As soon as this happened, the researchers became his protectors. They shielded him from prying eyes and ears, determined to unravel the mystery of his experience. They understood that Xavier was not merely a tourist who stumbled upon a mysterious tunnel. He was a conduit, a vessel through which fragments of a lost world were trying to speak. What they uncovered was more than a story. It was a revelation. The tunnel became a place of pilgrimage, not for thrill seekers, but for those hungry for knowledge. For those seeking to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. The forgotten path was trodden anew. To this day, no one else has dared enter the tunnel. The remaining 3 were never found, and the only person who left refuses to speak of it in a language we understand. But there are lessons to be learned here, echoes of truths that resonate even now. What if some places aren't meant to be entered? What if speaking a new language isn't a gift but a burden left behind by something ancient? What if the threads of time can be pulled taut enough to reveal the knots of history? These are the questions that linger. They dance on the edge of our perception, urging us to look beyond the veil of the everyday. They remind us that there are forces at play that we may not fully comprehend, harmonies of existence that reverberate through the corridors of time. In the heart of the whispering mouth, something stirs. It waits, perhaps, for those who seek not just adventure, but understanding. For those who dare to listen to the whispers of the past, to decipher the language of the ancients. Perhaps it yearns for the day when the forgotten path will lead not just to mystery, but to remembrance. The forgotten path is more than a tale. It's a call to explore the labyrinth of life, to navigate its twists and turns with courage and curiosity. It's a reminder that our journey through existence is fraught with moments of uncertainty and wonder, urging us to embrace both with equal measure. So when you find yourself standing at the precipice of the unknown, when the echoes of the past mingle with the whispers of the future, remember that you're part of a grand tapestry, woven with threads of time and touched by the hands of eternity. Now it's your turn. Share your thoughts below. What do you think happened to those who went into the tunnel? And have you ever encountered anything unexplained? I want to hear your stories. If you're ready for more journeys into the unknown, stay tuned for more episodes of The Forgotten Path. Click here to continue your adventure, or click here to watch more videos just like this one. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Till then, remember, some paths are meant to be forgotten, but others lead us home.